were going to
Yeah.
talk about who are the young up and coming players that people have seen in their club championships around the country. And I suppose a couple that really stood out to me in recent weeks both come from Tumivara and Adam Hall, who had 2-3 for Toom against Clonoty at the weekend, having come on at half time and playing into extra time. And also Darren McCarthy, who's his fellow Tumivara man, who's been very good recently, scored I think something like 16 or was it 19 points for the under-19s in Toom there in the last week or so. Then he's not overly young, but Darrell Woods, some of the scoring that he did for Holy Cross over the weekend. So get your comments in. Let us know who you think is a player that's really coming. So the quarterfinals in Tipperary over the weekend, we had two games that they were close to providing shocks. Another game that went to extra time that I've mentioned already, and a very one-sided game. So that was Drum coming up short against Thurles Sarsfields, 24 points to 112. And Drum's goal only came at the end from Tony Cahill. They really were beaten comprehensively in this game. Killadangan, I suppose they've been bookies' favourites to win the county title this year. They really narrowly saw off Holy Cross Ballycahill. That finished 222 to 317. Lockmore just about got across the line against Roscrea. That was 222 to 124. And I think Roscrea will be kicking themselves. That was their first quarterfinal since 2005. And they came very close there. And then finally, Tumivara 320, Clonoty Rossmore 124 after extra time. That was a bit of a thriller. Now the pace of the game dropped significantly in extra time, but of course you can't blame club players for that. But I have to say, Thurles get your comments in about young players, but Thurles Sarsfields, all of a sudden now, this looks like a different team under Paddy Maher this year. They started the group stages. They were very poor against Killadangan that day, and they were beaten comprehensively enough. But since then, they've really taken it on. They beat Clonoty Rossmore. Didn't hammer them or anything like that, but they beat them, won it nicely. Had previously won the mid. Beat Borrisolee all ends up. I watched them down in Borrisolee. Fairly well controlled the game against Nina, except for a bit of a run of wides during the second half. They allowed Nina back into it. But, they steadied down them when they needed to. But that victory over Drum and Inch yesterday, fair enough, Drum started okay, but just once Thurles took over, it's just this ferocious work rate. I see them winning the county title, and I see them being pretty decent in Munster this year, assuming they get there.
You were calling them cumbersome and slow and big and awkward nearly a couple of weeks ago. Your opinion has obviously changed.
It has changed massively, and I did think that. But some of the bigger players that I thought, wow, he doesn't look to be playing all that well, all of a sudden really are. Billy McCarthy's a huge man, and it's great to see that he's really gotten over his knee issues. Well, I certainly hope he has, and long may that continue, because he had such a rotten time with it. But he scored 1-2 the last day out. He wouldn't have dominated the game against Nina, but he scored 1-2, got a point yesterday, won an awful lot of ball. Dennis Maher's playing full back. We would have more traditionally seen him playing in the forwards, and he's played wing back before, but it's only a couple of years ago that he was called back to the Tipperary panel and thrown in full forward under Colin Bonner. But he's been doing really well at full forward. Rona Maher's dominating from the half back line, and you'd think it's such an easy thing, avoid him as the sweeper. But because of the work rate of the Thurles lads up the field, and this is without Paddy Creedon starting, probably one of the few county players that they have just at the moment that's in there as a forward. He was dropped there for the Nina match because of disciplinary issues. He came on with a couple of minutes to go in this game when the game was dead and buried. And what a strong position that is for Paddy Maher now. He's got a team that is working like dogs on the field. Like Conor Stakeley, he's going to do that. But across the board, everybody's working like dogs, which means that their backs are protected nicely. He's able to leave a county quality forward on the bench. They continue to win. You've got to believe that the mentality and the culture in that dressing room, just at the moment, heading for a semi-final against Lockmore, is exactly where it should be.
Yeah, Paddy would have been involved, obviously, with several squads that won county titles. So probably it was second nature nearly to peak at the right time or whatever, because they always generally peaked and produced their best performances towards the tail end of the year. It was probably a little bit of worry of whether they were going to motor at all, but they've really started motoring now. And they have a lot of tasty players. I'd like to Stephen Cattle midfield, and you obviously have McCormack up front as well. A lot of good players that are very good on the ball. But if you're working like dogs and you're hounding up top, it makes it so much easier for Ronan Matter to pick out lads and give that good quality ball into those kind of nippy kind of forwards as well. and they're humming along pretty nicely now. You'd have to say they're starting to deliver their best. Like, been pretty comprehensive the last 2 days. I know Nina had a bit of a fight back the last day, and even the day before that against Clonalty as well. They've gotten better with every game, you'd have to say, and that's exactly what you want going into the last 4 of a championship or going into potentially a county final. You want to be looking like you're improving every day and that you're going to produce their best on the biggest day, and that's what it looks like at the moment from Thurles. But like, I have to say, I hold my hands up here. I didn't expect this. I knew Roscrea were good from last year. I know Monleen beat them in the Munster intermediate final. I didn't think they'd push probably Lockmore that close, and like, Roscrea didn't score for a long while in the second half, like a long while. And it took kind of John McGrath to help turn the screw at Lockmore. I probably didn't expect that from Roscrea. I probably didn't expect from Holy Cross Ballycattle either, to be being honest with you. Just because they were kind of like, they were newbies in the quarter final. They hadn't been in one in a while. And they really threw it down to Killadangan as well. And like, those 2 games, it's like Shinrone yesterday, like those 2 teams survived and will be happy to have survived 2 really stern tests. But that kind of said to me that I think Tipperary is going to get even tastier over the next couple of years. You have Toom coming, you have Holy Cross Ballycattle coming, you have Roscrea coming, Lockmore always going to be there, Thurles always going to be there, Drummer always in around that knockout stages. Borrisoleigh were Munster champions a couple of years ago, Clonalty were county champions in 2018. You know, there's there's a hell of a lot of good teams in there. And it looks like there's going to be a few new faces on the scene over the next couple of years, which is always good to see.
Yeah, Roscrea were, like, the ball that they were playing to their inside forwards early in the game was really good. Shane Fletcher got a lovely goal. That was only after 4 minutes. And they put themselves in a position of something like 1-3 to a point ahead. But then they gave away a goal, probably softish enough. I think they had it at the other end of the field and they spilled possession, and John McGrath scored pretty soon just after that. Maybe they had a couple of opportunities to clear it. You know, you watch so many games, you're trying to figure out what game was what. But John McGrath scored 113, 1-3 of that from play. He's obviously just so good at club level. Noah McGrath had a very quiet game, actually, and he came off injured towards the end, so very interesting to see what the situation is with him. Was he even carrying an injury during the game? But I thought Ed Connolly was really good. He scored 3 points. He's just got that pace and power coming from wing forward. Liam McGrath was playing on the inside line. I think he's such a good outball. Like, he always shows for it, knows where to be. Very, very clever player. On the other side, Evan Fitzpatrick, I think, is a player that's, anytime I watch him play for Roscrea, he quite impresses me. Alan Tynan actually had to go off. And again, I presume that had to be an injury. You're not going to really take off your county man. Not that he was having a particularly influential game, but I'm not sure, maybe he was carrying an injury as well. But Luke Cashin, he scored 9.7 of those were from frees. Actually, by the way, just to go back to the Thurles game, Aidan McCormick, very silky forward. He actually had 7 wides over the course of the game. And Sars had 11 different scorers. And you mentioned Stephen Cahill there as a midfielder. He actually played in the half-forward line. He seemed to be centre forward for a nice bit of it. And, Podge Campion would like to hold the centre. But, of course, if you do try and hold the centre, a clever player will be able to get away from you and find those pockets to score. I think Stephen Cahill had his 5 points on the board by about 33 or 34 minutes. So he's just one of those lads that, at club level, there's these lads that, and county, obviously, but, like, they get the ball and you're just like, you're nearly chalking down the point even before they wind up to strike it. I think Sars are a serious team. But then Toomey Vara, so they're into the last 4 for the first time in 5 years after beating Clonalty Rossborough. And I think they probably had to beat Clonalty a couple of times to win this game. For a finish, Darren McCarthy, he scored 10 of those are frees. But Adam Hall coming on and scoring 2-3 was huge. And just towards the end of the game, when it looked like Clonalty, who'd had a couple of chances in injury time or late on in extra time to try and get themselves back level again. And I think there was just a point in it after maybe Cahill Burke had put over one of the frees. Again, hard to remember who did what because so much happened. But then there was a puck out for Toomey Vara. Adam Hall, young player, catches the puck out, turns, put it over the bar. And it just relieved all the pressure that had been on Toom and allowed them to get over the line. So, like, for them, that's a huge result. And for Clonalty, very tough, bitter pill to swallow.
Going into relegation now as well. Going into that relegation semi-final now. Is that next week? The 2 weeks, have they? Football next weekend. You'd want it after playing extra time, particularly if you're saying, I only saw bits of it, but if you're saying the energy or the pace of it definitely dropped significantly, they'll need their break and to try and regroup. And yeah, they're going to have to make sure the wheels don't fall off the wagon. We saw with the Glen how easily that can happen. Clonulty haven't particularly impressed this year, but they just need to deliver something to make sure that, I'm sure beating in a quarter final is one thing, but they just want to win that semi-final and get out of Dodge, basically.
Yeah, Kildangan then against Holy Cross. Like, I felt that Kildangan made hard work of this game in a way. Like, they were in a very strong position, and then Holy Cross finished the first half by getting 2 goals. Cathal Barrett, he absolutely nailed the penalty to the top right corner. That was really impressive. Got himself 3 points from play as well. David Fogarty
not given enough credit for his hurling ability, because people focus too much. Like, Cathal Barrett's a lovely hurler. Cathal Barrett is as nice a cornerback on the ball as you will get. Sean Finn and Cathal Barrett, I would say. Sean Finn probably marginally ahead, but like, he's a silky cornerback if there's ever such a thing. Like,
you'd put Finn ahead of him, would you?
I would. Finn's distribution is probably a bit better, yeah. But like, Barrett, because of the dark arts, Barrett probably, that part of his game is probably overlooked in my view. Again, Cathal Barrett is one of these lads that if you're from Tipperary, you love him. If you're from any other county, you probably don't like him. But if he was on your team, you'd take him in a heartbeat. One of those players that when you play against Tipperary, it's the sort of fella you dread, but you'd love to have him.
So then, just in terms of who was good for Kildangan, I thought Billy Seymour was very good. He continues to have really good form. He got 1-5 from play here and 5 frees as well. Brian Malachny scored 1-1. Andy Lucknan, who's forced himself into the team recently, he scored 3. And Sean Hayes scored 3, but as well as that, he won a number of frees, and I thought he was very good. On the other side, like, Dara Woods is a name that definitely would have caught the eye of a lot of people over the weekend because of some of those points he scored, like 5 frees. But some of the points that he scored, like facing away from the goal on the sideline from a fair distance out, like he was popping them over from all angles.
I said it, I kind of tweeted it. I think he's a bit of a Chad Dwyer about him. I'd often look at Laois matches and you see Chad Dwyer winding up from underneath the stand over the shoulder, and you're like, what is this lad at? Number one, he shouldn't be shooting at all. You think there's no chance he should be shooting, so you just think he's going to lay it off. Off there for a second, but Dara Woods, yeah, he reminds me a bit of Chad Dwyer. You kind of don't think he should be shooting from where he's shooting. He still shoots, and invariably they go over the bar as well. He had one of them kind of days the other day. Now, he probably flagged as the game went on, but he definitely, if he wasn't on Liam Cattle's kind of antenna, I'd say he's on it after the weekend. And just for what you were saying when we were kind of just doing a bit of research for the show, Cattle knows him fairly well too, by all accounts. So he'll know his form, he'll know his character, he'll know whether maybe county hurling would suit him. So that's going to be interesting to see whether he's on the Tipp radar for 2024.
Yeah, certainly in terms of stick work, he'd be up there. Gandon Sean Collier says, interesting. Sarah's look far more physical in my opinion. Allowances are Cork televised club games. They must be made because they're in Parky Queeve. Huge pitch, not tight, less physicality. Jay Kwan says, big difference. Finn doesn't get sent off. I don't think Cathal Barrett gets sent off.
No. See, I have to say, like, I'm from Offaly, so it doesn't bother me. Like, but there's Barrett is like, I admire Cathal. I think he's a brilliant player, but he's one of these players like that. Just people get so upset about him. Like, he really
does he get sent off? Like, how many red cards can you think of?
I actually can't think of any off the top of my head. He's obviously involved in that incident with Richie Hogan, or Richie Hogan got sent off, but I can't think of any. But he really rankles people for whatever. It's his combative style, I think, and because he's in your togs, like when he's marking you as well. But he really, really rankles people outside of Tipp now.
Yeah, he definitely does, and wrongly so, as far as I'm concerned.